nowhere to run. Zelensky hunted by Ukrainian elites. The international support that catapulted Zelensky to power and maintained him as a symbol of resistance against Russia is beginning to crumble. A hunt against him has begun in Ukraine. His stubbornness in not allowing elections and his refusal to negotiate with Moscow, despite the obvious consequences for the country, have placed him in an unsustainable situation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian elites, including powerful oligarchs and key parliamentary figures, have begun to move strategically under Washington's orders. They are after him. The Ukrainian elites are after Zelensky's head. The illegitimate president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, once described by the West as a symbol of resistance against the so-called Russian invasion, now finds himself in a political situation that many consider unsustainable. Although he was initially seen by Europe as a legitimate leader who unified the Ukrainian people in their struggle for sovereignty, the reality of recent years has revealed that his power is starting to waver, and there is a plan to remove him. In recent weeks, Ukrainian elites, supported by Western interests, have begun to align against Zelensky, determined to overthrow him. The Russian media outlet Tsargrad speaks of an imminent betrayal. But how, when, and where? That remains to be seen. Within the Supreme Rada, efforts are already underway to expedite elections in May. Reports indicate that the United States has ordered this move and has even decided that Zelensky must step down. He might not even be allowed to run in the elections, according to sources cited by the Russian outlet Sila, RFU. Even Donald Trump has spoken about Zelensky's unpopularity, stating that only 4% of Ukrainians want him in office. The Ukrainian elites are well aware of the implicit orders coming from the White House and are holding meetings to carefully plan his removal. What was once unanimous support has now become a political battlefield where the most powerful factions in the country are aligning against him. The struggle for power has a clear protagonist: Zelensky. The cardboard president has maintained an authoritarian leadership, refusing to negotiate a viable peace with Russia. His recent declaration that there will be no presidential elections while the war continues only isolates him further from key sectors of his country. In his efforts to show he will not relent against Russia, he has closed the door to any democratic process, whether through elections or peace negotiations. This stance has created a legitimacy vacuum. The Ukrainian elites, fed up with a lack of solutions and the prolonged conflict, have begun maneuvering to replace him with new leadership. Internationally, especially in the United States, it is increasingly evident that Zelensky is no longer seen as an ally capable of resolving the crisis. During the early days of Russia's military operation, the Ukrainian president was portrayed as a determined and brave leader who mobilized resources and international support. However, the promises of a swift victory, prolonged resistance, and his inability to negotiate a diplomatic solution have led many in Washington to reconsider their unconditional support. The United States, which backed Zelensky with massive military and financial resources, now faces the reality that his unwillingness to negotiate is prolonging the war and further destabilizing Ukraine. This shift in perception has led to what analysts call Plan B, in which Ukrainian interests align with the necessity of a leadership change. This Plan B is not just about removing or replacing Zelensky as president. The most likely scenario is a smooth transition of power, one that could prevent violent upheaval in Ukraine and facilitate a potential peace agreement with Russia. Those positioning themselves against Zelensky seek leadership more open to negotiations. The battle for power is not just about the presidency. It's also about control of the Supreme Rada, Ukraine's parliament, whose influence has become central in the current political process. Rumors point to key figures emerging as potential successors to Zelensky. Among the most prominent names are David Arakhamia, leader of the Servant of the People parliamentary faction, Yulia Tymoshenko, Dmytro Razumkov, and in an unexpected twist, former President Petro Poroshenko, who was displaced by Zelensky years ago. The fact that these names are surfacing as potential replacements is no coincidence. Ukraine is at a critical juncture where international diplomacy and internal legitimacy matter more than ever. While some of these figures may seem unlikely choices, such as Poroshenko, whose relationship with Russia is complex, the Ukrainian elite appears willing to do whatever is necessary to change course. For Russia, Poroshenko remains a controversial figure due to his role in the Minsk agreements. However, his participation in the political process may be seen as a necessary evil. He has shown a willingness to act in the interests of both the West and Ukraine, albeit at the cost of difficult compromises, making him a useful actor in the transition of power. Domestically, Zelensky's administration has been characterized by a concentration of power in his hands. This has directly impacted Ukraine's political dynamics, where oligarchs and other key players have been systematically sidelined or even targeted by Zelensky's policies. The imposition of sanctions on Ukraine's main oligarchs, who have been fundamental political actors since the country's independence, has generated deep discontent among the elites. This lack of support has left Zelensky isolated, without key allies in the state apparatus. The military, for its part, continues fighting on the front lines, but does not seem willing to support a president who has lost the backing of the political elite. The growing internal tensions have led many to believe that a leadership change is becoming increasingly likely. For many analysts, Zelensky has reached a point where his government is no longer viable. The Russians, who have always considered him an illegitimate figure due to the lack of elections, are unwilling to negotiate with someone they see as an imposter. In this context, within the corridors of power in Kiev, Zelensky is no longer the undisputed leader he once was. Instead, he is a man cornered by his own decisions, the interests of those who once supported him, and a people increasingly weary of an unending war. The political landscape in Ukraine is shifting rapidly, and Zelensky's grip on power is weakening, with the elites and international forces moving against him. His future remains uncertain. Will Ukraine see a new leadership emerge? And what impact will this have on the ongoing war? Don't miss our full analysis on YouTube. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on the latest developments in Ukraine.